My son threw me out of my own house like I was trash, changed the locks, dumped my belongings on the curb. I slept in my car for 3 nights, broken and alone, while he celebrated. But what he didn't know was that in 3 days, he was going to find out exactly what that mistake would cost him.
Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments section what time it is where you're watching this.
My wife died on a Tuesday. Clara. 43 years together, and she was gone in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and defeat. The doctor said it was her heart. I think it was something deeper, something that gave up when the world got too heavy. The funeral was small, just me, Brandon, a handful of neighbors from our street in Scottsdale, and Clara's sister who flew in from Portland. I stood at the front of the chapel, staring at the casket covered in white lilies, her favorite. The air was thick with the smell of flowers and wood polish, and I couldn't stop thinking about how much she would have hated all the fuss. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of everyone. Brandon stood beside me, stiff in his black suit, checking his phone twice during the service. His wife, Vanessa, wasn't even trying to hide her boredom. She kept adjusting her dress, whispering something to him that made his jaw tighten. I caught his eye once, hoping for something, anything, that looked like the boy I used to know, the one who used to help Clara plant tomatoes in the backyard, the one who called me every Sunday just to talk about football. But that kid was gone. After the service, we went back to my house, our house, the one Clara and I bought in 1987, when this neighborhood was still dirt lots and dreams. I walked through the front door, and the silence hit me like a fist. No humming from the kitchen, no NPR playing softly in the background, no Clara. The living room still smelled like her lavender lotion. Her reading glasses were on the coffee table, folded next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. I picked them up, and my hands started shaking. Brandon and Vanessa didn't stay long. They ate some casserole one of the neighbors brought, and then stood by the door like they had somewhere better to be. "Dad, we need to talk soon," Brandon said, his voice flat, "about the house, about everything." I looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes were cold, calculating, like he was already doing math in his head. "Not today," I said. Vanessa touched his arm. "Brandon, we should—" "Not today," I repeated, louder this time. They left, and I was alone. I walked out to the backyard, where Clara's garden was still blooming. The roses she'd planted last spring were bright red against the Arizona dirt. I sat on the bench we'd built together, the one with our initials carved into the armrest, and I finally let myself break. I cried until my chest ached. I cried until the sun started to set and the desert air turned cold. I cried because the woman who knew every part of me was gone, and the son I raised didn't even care enough to stay. But grief is a strange thing. It makes you soft. It makes you vulnerable. And I didn't realize it yet, but that vulnerability was exactly what Brandon was waiting for. The next morning, everything changed. I woke up to the sound of a diesel engine idling in my driveway. It was barely 8 in the morning. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours. My body ached from crying, and my mind was still foggy with grief. For a moment, I thought maybe I was dreaming. Maybe Clara was still in the kitchen making coffee. But then I heard the voices. I pulled on my robe and shuffled to the front window. A U-Haul truck sat in my driveway, its back door rolled open. Brandon was standing near the cab, talking on his phone. Vanessa was already at my front door, her hand raised to knock. I opened it before she could. "Vanessa?" I said, confused. "What's going on?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Morning, Aiden. We tried calling, but you didn't pick up." I glanced at my phone on the kitchen counter. Dead. I'd forgotten to charge it. Brandon walked up behind her, pocketing his phone. "Hey, Dad, we need to come in." Okay, I said, stepping aside. My brain wasn't working fast enough to process what was happening. They walked in like they owned the place. Brandon barely looked at me. Vanessa immediately started walking through the house, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors Clara and I had refurnished ourselves. "Brandon, what's this about?" I asked, my voice still rough from sleep. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood in the middle of the living room, hands in his pockets, staring at the walls like he was appraising them. Vanessa called from the kitchen, "Brandon, this layout is perfect. We could open this up, knock down that wall, and stage it modern. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, it'd sell fast." My stomach dropped. "Sell?" I repeated. Brandon finally turned to face me. His expression was blank. "Dad, we need to talk about the house." "What about it?" Vanessa reappeared, holding her phone. "The market's insane right now. Zillow has this place listed at $1.2 million. Maybe more if we put some work into it." I felt like the floor was tilting under me. "This is my house." "It's too much house," Brandon said, his tone clipped. "You're 71. You can't maintain this place by yourself. The property taxes alone are killing you." I stared at him. "Who told you that?" He didn't answer. Vanessa jumped in, her voice syrupy sweet. "We found a really nice assisted living facility in Tempe. It's clean, affordable, and you'd have people around. You wouldn't be so isolated. Isolated. Like I was some burden they needed to warehouse." "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly. Brandon's jaw tightened. He exchanged a look with Vanessa, and something passed between them. Something I didn't like. "We're not asking, Dad," he said quietly. The air in the room went cold. "What does that mean?" I asked. Brandon pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and set it on the coffee table. "Mom put my name on the deed 3 years ago for estate planning. You didn't know?" My heart stopped. "That's not true," I whispered. But the way he looked at me, smug, certain, told me it was. Vanessa smiled. "We'll give you a few days to pack, but we need to move quickly on this." And just like that, my son wasn't my son anymore. He was a stranger evicting me from my own life.
I couldn't breathe. The paper sat on the coffee table between us like a bomb waiting to go off. Brandon's name, my wife's signature, a date from 3 years ago, back when Clara was still healthy, still here. "She never told me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Brandon shrugged. "She was protecting the family, making sure things would be simple when the time came." Simple. He made it sound like estate planning, like paperwork, not like my entire world was being ripped out and under me. "Brandon, please," I said, looking at my son, really looking at him. "This house is all I have left of her. The garden outside, the bench we carved our names into, the bedroom where she—" "Dad, stop." He cut me off. His voice was sharp, impatient. "You're making this emotional when it's just practical." Practical. Vanessa sat down on Claire's favorite chair, crossing her legs like she was settling in for a business meeting. "Aiden, let's be honest. You're 71. You have arthritis. You can barely mow the lawn anymore. What happens if you fall? What if something happens and no one's here to help you?" "I'll manage." "You won't," Brandon said flatly. "And we're not going to sit around waiting for a crisis." I stood up, my hands shaking. "So what? You're just going to take my house? Kick me out?" "We're not kicking you out," Vanessa said, her tone dripping with fake sympathy. "We're helping you transition into a better living situation. A facility. You mean a facility." Brandon crossed his arms. "It's a nice place. Sun Valley Senior Living. Clean rooms, activities, meals included. You'd actually have a community instead of sitting here alone all day." "I don't want a community. I want my home." The room went silent. Brandon looked at Vanessa, then back at me. His expression hardened. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly. Grief does that, but we've already talked to a realtor. The market's hot, and if we list this place in the next 2 weeks, we could close by the end of the month." My chest tightened. "You've already talked to a realtor?" "We had to move fast," Vanessa said, like it was obvious. I felt dizzy. "Clara's been gone 4 days." Brandon didn't flinch. "And life goes on." Those words hit me like a slap. I stared at the man standing in front of me, the boy I used to read bedtime stories to, the kid I taught how to ride a bike in this very driveway, and I didn't recognize him. "Your mother loved this house," I said, my voice breaking. "She spent every weekend in that garden. She painted every room herself. She picked out every piece of furniture. And you want to sell it like it's nothing?" "It's not nothing," Brandon said. "It's $1.2 million. There it was, the truth. Vanessa stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Aiden, we're giving you until the end of the week. Pack what you need, we'll handle the rest." "And if I refuse?" I asked. Brandon's eyes went cold. "Then we'll handle it without you." He turned and walked toward the door. Vanessa followed, her heels clicking against the floor Clara used to polish every Sunday. "Brandon!" I called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. "Please," I whispered, "don't do this." He stood there for a moment, his hand on the doorknob. Then he opened it and walked out. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and I realized, standing alone in my living room, that my son had already made his choice. I just didn't know how far he was willing to go yet.
2 days later, I came home to find the locks changed. I'd spent the morning at the bank, trying to understand what Clara had signed, what rights I still had. My lawyer, an old friend from church, told me it would take time to sort through the paperwork. Time I apparently didn't have. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a locksmith's van parked out front. A stranger was drilling new deadbolts into my front door. My door. I got out of the car, my legs weak. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" The locksmith looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Sorry, buddy. Just doing what I was hired to do." "By who?" He jerked his thumb toward the house. "The owner." I felt sick. Before I could respond, Brandon came out the front door, followed by 2 men in work uniforms. They were carrying furniture, my furniture, loading it into a truck parked in the street. "Brandon!" I shouted, rushing toward him. "What the hell is this?" He barely looked at me. "Dad, I told you. End of the week. You didn't pack, so we're handling it." "You can't do this!" I already did. I tried to push past him, tried to get into my own house, but one of the movers stepped in front of me. He was twice my size, arms crossed. "Sir, you need to step back," he said. I looked at Brandon. "You're really going to let them stop me from entering my own home?" "It's not your home anymore," Brandon said coldly. Behind him, Vanessa appeared in the doorway, holding Clara's jewelry box. My heart stopped. "Put that down," I said, my voice shaking. She glanced at it, then at Brandon. "Is any of this worth keeping?" "Just toss it," he said. "No!" I lunged forward, but the mover grabbed my arm. I watched, helpless, as Vanessa dumped the jewelry box into a black trash bag. Clara's wedding ring, the locket her mother gave her, the pearl earrings she wore on our anniversary every year. Gone. Thrown away like garbage. They worked fast. Within an hour, my entire life was piled on the curb in trash bags and cardboard boxes. My clothes, my books, Clara's photo albums, the quilt her grandmother made. Everything. Neighbors started coming out of their houses, drawn by the noise. Mrs. Patterson from across the street stood on her porch, her hand over her mouth. The Caldwells whispered to each other, staring. I stood there in the Arizona heat, 71 years old, watching strangers pick through my belongings like vultures. A teenager on a skateboard grabbed a lamp Clara bought at an estate sale. A woman in yoga pants took a stack of books. Someone else, someone I'd never seen before, picked up our wedding photo. The frame was cracked. The glass had shattered across Clara's face, cutting through her smile. "Please," I said, weakly, "that's mine." The stranger looked at me, then at the broken frame, and set it back down in the pile. No one wanted it. I bent down and picked it up, cradling it against my chest. The glass cut into my palm, but I didn't care. Brandon came down the driveway, keys jingling in his hand. "Dad, you need to leave now." "Where am I supposed to go?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just got into his car, Vanessa beside him, and drove away. I stood there on the curb, holding a broken photograph with nowhere left to go.
The first night, I told myself it was temporary. I parked my car in the lot behind a Denny's in Tempe, far enough from the streetlights that no one would notice me. The engine ticked as it cooled. The cracked wedding photo sat on the passenger seat beside me, wrapped in an old t-shirt. I tried to stretch out in the back seat, but my legs didn't fit. My knees pressed against the door, my back twisted at an angle that made my spine scream. The Arizona night was cold, colder than people think, and I'd only grabbed one thin blanket from the trash pile before they threw everything away. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling of my car and tried not to think about how I'd ended up here. By the second night, my body was failing me. My lower back felt like someone had driven nails into it. Every time I shifted position, something popped or cramped. I hadn't eaten much. A stale bagel from a gas station, some coffee I couldn't finish. My stomach hurt, but I couldn't tell if it was from hunger or grief. Around 2 in the morning, a security guard knocked on my window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "You can't stay here," he said through the glass. "I'm just resting," I told him. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in his face. Pity, maybe, or a recognition that I wasn't some drifter, just an old man with nowhere else to go. "One more night," he said quietly. "Then you need to find somewhere else." I nodded. He walked away. I sat there in the dark, and for the first time in days, I let myself remember. Clara used to make hot chocolate on cold nights. She'd bring me a mug while I watched the evening news, and she'd sit beside me on the couch, her head on my shoulder. We didn't always talk. We didn't need to. Just being close was enough. I remembered the way she hummed while she gardened, the way she'd leave little notes in my lunch when I still worked, the way she'd reach for my hand in the middle of the night, even in her sleep, just to make sure I was still there. And now I was alone in a parking lot, sleeping in a car that smelled like fast food and desperation. The third night was the worst. My back hurt so bad I could barely move. I hadn't showered in days. My clothes smelled like sweat and exhaust fumes. I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back, hollow-eyed, unshaven, broken. I thought about giving up, about calling Brandon and begging him to let me stay anywhere, even a closet, just somewhere with a bed. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me, the coldness in his eyes, the way he'd thrown Clara's jewelry away like it was nothing. And I realized something. I wasn't going to beg anymore, because Brandon didn't know everything. He didn't know about the safety deposit box at Wells Fargo. He didn't know about the documents Clara and I had prepared, just in case. Tomorrow,
I was going to the bank, and everything was about to change.
Clara knew. That's what I kept thinking as I drove to Wells Fargo on the fourth morning, my back screaming with every bump in the road. She knew this would happen. It was 5 years ago when she first brought it up. We were sitting in the backyard, watching the sunset paint the desert sky orange and purple. Brandon had just called, again, asking if we'd considered selling the house and moving somewhere more manageable. "He's already planning our funeral," Clara said quietly. I'd laughed it off. "He's just worried about us." But Clara didn't laugh. She set down her iced tea and turned to face me, her expression serious. "Aiden, I need you to listen to me. Brandon's changed. Ever since he married Vanessa, it's like he sees us as assets, not parents." "That's not fair," I said, though even then, something in her words rang true. "I want to protect this house. I want to protect us. I want to make sure that no matter what happens, you're taken care of." The next week, she made an appointment with an estate attorney in Phoenix, a woman named Patricia Hodges, sharp as a tack, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. We sat in her office while Clara laid out her concerns. "My son thinks he's entitled to everything we've built," she said. "I need to make sure he can't just take it all the moment we're vulnerable." Patricia listened, taking notes. Then she asked, "Did you put his name on the deed?" Clara's face went pale. "Yes, 3 years ago. Brandon said it was for estate planning, that it would make things easier when we—" "It makes things easier for him," Patricia interrupted. "But there are ways around this." That's when Clara set up the trust. It took months to put everything in place. The house, our savings, the life insurance policies, all of it transferred into an irrevocable living trust, with me as the sole beneficiary. Brandon's name was quietly removed from the deed through a legal process he never knew about. "But what about the papers he has?" I asked Patricia. "Outdated, legally meaningless. The moment the trust was filed, those documents became void." Clara made me promise not to tell Brandon. "Not yet," she said. "Let him think he's in control. If he ever tries something, we'll have the upper hand." I thought she was being paranoid. I thought we'd never need it. But Clara knew her son better than I did. Now, standing in the bank lobby with my wrinkled clothes and unwashed hair, I gave the clerk my name and asked to access my safety deposit box. She looked at me with thinly veiled concern, but led me to the vault anyway. Inside the box was everything. The trust documents, the new deed with only my name on it, Clara's will which explicitly stated that Brandon would inherit nothing unless I chose to give it to him, and a handwritten letter in Clara's handwriting. "Aiden, if you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong. It means Brandon has shown you who he really is. I'm sorry I'm not there to help you through this, but I need you to fight. Don't let him take what we built. Don't let him erase our life together. You are stronger than you think, and you are not alone. I love you. Always. Clara." My hands shook as I folded the letter and placed it back in the box. I gathered the documents, stuffed them into a manila envelope, and walked out of that bank with my head held high for the first time in days. Brandon thought he'd won. He thought he'd outsmarted us, outmaneuvered us, thrown us away like garbage. But he had no idea what he had just thrown away. His inheritance, his future, his mother's forgiveness. And now it was time to show him exactly what that mistake would cost him.
Patricia Hodges' office hadn't changed since the last time I'd been there with Clara. Same leather chairs, same dusty law books lining the walls, same smell of coffee and old paper. But everything else had changed. I sat across from her desk, the manila envelope in my lap, and she studied me with the kind of look that made me feel like she could see straight through to my bones. "Aiden," she said gently, "tell me what happened." So I did. I told her everything. Brandon showing up with Vanessa and the moving truck, the ultimatum, the changed locks, my belongings dumped on the curb like trash, 3 nights sleeping in my car behind a Denny's. By the time I finished, Patricia's jaw was set tight, her eyes sharp with anger. "That son of a—" She stopped herself, took a breath. "I'm sorry, that was unprofessional. But what Brandon did is not only morally reprehensible, it's illegal." "But he had papers," I said. "He showed me documents with Clara's signature. He said his name was on the deed." Patricia leaned forward. "It was on the deed 3 years ago. But do you remember what we did after Clara came to see me?" I nodded slowly. "The trust." "Exactly." She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file labeled Mitchell Family Trust. Clara transferred everything, the house, your savings accounts, the life insurance policies, into an irrevocable living trust. You are the sole trustee and beneficiary. Brandon's name was legally removed from the deed when the trust was executed. My heart was pounding. "So the papers he showed me are worthless," Patricia said flatly. "Outdated documents that hold no legal weight. The moment that trust was filed with the county recorder's office, Brandon lost all claim to that property." I sat back in my chair, trying to process what she was saying. "But he changed the locks. He threw me out." "Which means he committed an illegal eviction," Patricia said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "In Arizona, you cannot forcibly remove someone from their legal residence without proper eviction proceedings. Even if he had owned the house, which he doesn't, what he did was criminal." "Criminal?" She nodded. "Illegal lockout, possibly theft depending on what he took. And if we can prove he knowingly used fraudulent documents to intimidate you, that's another charge entirely." I thought about Vanessa throwing Clara's jewelry box into the trash, about the movers blocking me from my own front door, about Brandon's cold eyes as he told me it wasn't my home anymore. "What do we do?" I asked. Patricia pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "First, we file an immediate restraining order to prevent him from selling or damaging the property. Second, we notify him and his wife that they are occupying your home illegally and have 24 hours to vacate. Third, we send a demand letter for the return of all personal property or financial compensation for anything that was destroyed or stolen. And if he refuses," her smile was thin and sharp, "then we file a lawsuit for illegal eviction, theft, elder abuse, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I'll make sure every newspaper in Maricopa County knows what he did to his own father." I stared at her. "Elder abuse? That's exactly what this is, Aiden, and Arizona takes it very seriously." She stood up, gathering papers. "I'll have the documents ready by tomorrow morning. We'll serve him personally. I want to see his face when he realizes what he's done." I left her office an hour later with my head spinning. Brandon thought he'd taken everything from me, but he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. And tomorrow, he was going to find out exactly what Clara had been protecting me from all along.
I checked into a Motel 6 off Interstate 10 that night. It wasn't much, just a clean bed, a working shower, and a television that only got half the channels. But after 3 nights in my car, it felt like a palace. I stood under the hot water for almost 30 minutes, watching the grime and exhaustion swirl down the drain. My back still ached, my muscles still screamed, but something had shifted inside me. The helplessness was gone. The fog of grief had lifted just enough for me to see clearly again. I wasn't a victim anymore. After I dried off, I sat on the edge of the bed in a clean shirt and looked at myself in the mirror across the room. I looked older than I remembered, thinner, more tired, but there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen in days. Fight. I thought about Clara, about the way she used to look at me when I was struggling with something at work, some problem I couldn't solve. She'd touch my hand and say, "You've got this, Aiden. You always do." I wished she was here now. I wished I could tell her that her plan worked, that everything she'd done to protect us was about to pay off. But in a way, she was here. In the trust documents, in the letter she'd left me, in every careful decision she'd made to keep us safe from the son we'd raised together. I pulled out my phone and looked at the last text message Brandon had sent me, 2 days before he changed the locks. "Dad, stop being stubborn. This is for your own good." My own good. I almost laughed. He really believed that. He really thought he was doing me a favor by throwing me out, by destroying everything Clara and I had built, by treating me like I was already dead. Tomorrow morning, Patricia would serve him with the papers, and tomorrow he'd find out that the house wasn't his, that the money wasn't his, that everything he thought he'd won was actually a lie. And I was going to be there to see his face when it happened. I ordered Chinese food from a place down the street, fried rice and orange chicken that tasted better than anything I'd eaten in days. I sat on the bed, eating slowly, watching some old Western on TV, where the good guys actually won in the end. For the first time since Clara died, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not yet, but a quiet, steady determination that settled into my chest like armor. Brandon had tried to break me. He'd tried to erase me, to throw me away like I didn't matter. But I wasn't broken. And tomorrow, he was going to learn that the man he'd underestimated, the grieving old man he thought he could bully and discard, was still standing. I finished my dinner, turned off the TV, and lay back on the bed. Sleep came easier that night, because I knew that when the sun came up, everything was going to change.
I wasn't there to see it, but I can imagine exactly how it went. Brandon and Vanessa sitting in my living room, their living room now, or so they thought, celebrating their victory with expensive wine and takeout from that Italian place on Camelback Road. Vanessa probably had her laptop open, scrolling through Pinterest boards full of modern farmhouse aesthetics and open-concept floor plans. "We should definitely knock down this wall," she would have said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Open it up. Makes the whole space feel bigger." Brandon would have nodded, leaning back on the couch Clara and I bought on our 20th anniversary. "The realtor said we could list it for 1.3 if we stage it right. Or we could rent it out, charge $3,000 a month easy, use that income to buy another property, build a portfolio." A portfolio. That's what my life had become to them. An investment opportunity. I can picture Brandon swirling his wine, staring out at Clara's garden through the window. Maybe he felt something, a flicker of guilt, a moment of doubt. Maybe he thought about the way I'd looked at him when the movers blocked me from my own door. But then Vanessa would have touched his arm. "You did the right thing, babe. He wasn't taking care of himself. He would have just rotted away in this place, clinging to the past." "I know," Brandon would have said, and maybe he even believed it. "It's better this way, for everyone. Better." as if throwing your father out and destroying his belongings was an act of mercy. I imagine he told himself all kinds of stories to sleep at night. That I was too old, too stubborn, too stuck in the past, that Clara would have wanted this, wanted him to take charge and be practical. He'd probably convinced himself that I'd thank him eventually. That once I settled into some sterile assisted living facility with its beige walls and scheduled activities, I'd realized he'd done me a favor. Vanessa probably raised her glass. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, Brandon would have echoed. They didn't know that while they were toasting their future in my house, I was sitting in a motel room with legal documents that would destroy everything they'd planned. They didn't know that Clara had seen this coming years ago. They didn't know that the deed Brandon thought he had ownership was worthless, that the trust Clara set up had stripped away every claim he thought he had. They didn't know that tomorrow morning a process server would knock on that door and hand them papers that would turn their celebration into ashes. Brandon thought he was smart. He thought he'd outmaneuvered his grieving, vulnerable father. He thought the hard part was over. But he was wrong, because the hard part hadn't even started yet. And when it did, when he opened that door tomorrow and reality came crashing down, I was going to be there to watch every second of it.
The process server knocked on the door at 9:30 in the morning. I was standing across the street with Patricia, both of us watching from her car. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Brandon opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, coffee mug in hand. He looked annoyed, probably thought it was a neighbor or a delivery driver. The server handed him the envelope. "Brandon Mitchell?" "Yeah?" "You've been served." Brandon's face went from annoyed to confused. He tore open the envelope right there in the doorway, and I watched his expression shift as he read the first page. Confusion, then disbelief, then anger. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, but the server was already walking back to his car. Patricia opened her door. That's our cue. We crossed the street together. My legs felt shaky, but I kept walking. This was my house, my driveway, my front door. Brandon looked up and saw me. His face went red. "Dad, what is this?" He waved the papers at me like they were on fire. "That," I said quietly, "is a restraining order and a notice of illegal eviction and a demand for the return of my property." "Your property?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "Dad, have you lost your mind? This is my house. Mom put my name on the deed." Patricia stepped forward, her briefcase in hand. "Mr. Mitchell, my name is Patricia Hodges. I'm your father's attorney, and I need to inform you that the deed you're referring to was superseded by an irrevocable living trust established by your mother 5 years ago." Brandon stared at her. "What?" "Your mother transferred all assets, including this property, into a trust with your father as the sole trustee and beneficiary. Your name was legally removed from the deed at that time. The documents you possess are outdated and hold no legal authority." Vanessa appeared behind Brandon, still in her bathrobe. "What's going on?" "They're saying the house isn't ours," Brandon said, his voice tight. "That's ridiculous." Vanessa snatched the papers from his hand and started reading. Her eyes widened. "This is fake. They forged this." Patricia didn't even blink. "Ma'am, everything is filed with the Maricopa County Recorder's Office. You're welcome to verify it yourself. But I assure you these documents are legally binding." "You can't do this," Brandon said, turning to me. "Dad, come on. Mom wouldn't have—" "She did, because she knew. She knew what you'd become." His face went pale. "You have 24 hours to vacate the property.
Patricia continued, her voice sharp and professional. Any belongings you've removed from the premises must be returned or compensated. If you fail to comply, we will pursue charges for illegal eviction, theft, and elder abuse. Elder abuse? Vanessa's voice went shrill. We were trying to help him. You changed the locks on his legal residence, Patricia said coldly. You forcibly removed him without notice or legal proceedings. You destroyed or disposed of his personal property. That is textbook elder abuse under Arizona law. Brandon's hands were shaking. This is insane. We had a plan. We were going to sell my house, throw away my life, erase everything your mother and I built together. He couldn't look at me. I want you out by tomorrow, I said, my voice steady. And I want Clara's jewelry box back. Everything you threw away, every single thing. We don't have it anymore, Vanessa whispered. It's gone. We threw it out. Something inside me cracked, but I didn't let it show. Patricia handed Brandon another document. This is an itemized list of property destroyed or stolen. You'll be hearing from us regarding compensation. She turned to leave, and I followed. Behind us, I heard Vanessa's voice, desperate and sharp. Brandon, call our lawyer now! But I didn't look back, because for the first time in days, I was walking away from my son instead of being thrown out by him, and it felt like justice.
They didn't leave quietly. For 24 hours, I stayed at the motel while Patricia monitored the situation. Brandon tried calling me 17 times. I didn't answer. He left voicemails, first angry, then desperate, then something that almost sounded like begging. Dad, please, we can work this out. Just talk to me. But I was done talking. When the deadline passed, Patricia filed for a court-ordered eviction. A sheriff deputy showed up at the house with a locksmith, the same one Brandon had hired to lock me out, which felt like its own kind of poetry. I got a text from Mrs. Patterson across the street. They're loading up a U-Haul. Brandon looks like he's been crying. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. But I also felt something else, relief that it was almost over. Patricia told me later what happened after they left the house. Brandon and Vanessa moved into a cramped apartment in Mesa, the kind of place with paper-thin walls and a parking lot full of broken-down cars. The down payment they'd been planning to make on a second investment property? Gone. Eaten up by legal fees and the compensation they owed me for Clara's destroyed belongings. Vanessa's friends started whispering. Word spread fast in their social circle. The couple who'd thrown out the grieving father, only to lose everything when the truth came out. Invitations to dinner parties dried up. Comments on Vanessa's Instagram went from supportive to savage. Karma is real. Imagine treating your own father like that. Gold digger got what she deserved. Vanessa blamed Brandon for everything. I heard through Mrs. Patterson, who heard through her hairdresser, that they were fighting constantly, screaming matches that echoed through the apartment complex at 2 a.m. You said it was a sure thing, Vanessa shouted at him one night, loud enough that neighbors complained. My mom lied to me, Brandon yelled back. She never told me about the trust. But that wasn't true, and somewhere deep down he knew it. Clara had tried to talk to him. She'd tried to warn him that greed would cost him everything. He just hadn't been listening. Brandon's business started falling apart too. He worked in real estate development, commercial properties, strip malls, that sort of thing. But when his partners found out what he'd done, they started distancing themselves. Nobody wants to work with a man who'd throw his own father into the street. One by one, his deals collapsed. His reputation crumbled. The golden boy who always had it figured out suddenly couldn't catch a break. And Vanessa? She filed for divorce 3 months later. She walked away with half of nothing and moved back to California to live with her sister. I heard she tells people she's the victim, that Brandon manipulated her, that she never wanted to hurt me. Maybe she even believes it. Meanwhile, I moved back into my house. The locks were changed again, this time by me, with keys that only I controlled. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls Clara had painted, standing in the kitchen where she used to hum while cooking, sitting on the back porch where we'd watched 1,000 sunsets together. It felt different now, quieter, emptier, but it was mine. I replanted Clara's garden, fixed the fence Brandon had let fall into disrepair, hung new photos on the walls, pictures of Clara and me from back when we were young and stupid and so in love it hurt. And every morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, and I could almost hear her voice. "You did good, Aiden. I'm proud of you." Brandon tried to call again last week. I let it go to voicemail. I'm not ready yet. Maybe someday, but not today.
The first thing I did when I walked back through that front door was stand in the entryway and just breathe. The house smelled different, like strangers had been living here, like the air itself had changed, but underneath it all, I could still catch traces of Clara, her lavender lotion, the faint scent of the vanilla candles she loved, something undefinable that was just her. I walked through each room slowly, cataloging the damage. Brandon and Vanessa had rearranged furniture, taken down photos, stripped the walls of everything that made this place ours. The bedroom looked sterile, like a hotel room. The kitchen counters were bare. Clara's recipe box was gone. But the bones were still here. The house we'd built together was still standing. I started with the garden. Clara's roses were overgrown, choked with weeds. The tomato plants she'd been so proud of had withered and died from neglect. But the soil was still good, and some of the perennials had survived. I spent 3 days on my knees in the dirt, pulling weeds, trimming dead branches, watering everything back to life. My back ached, my hands blistered, but it felt good, like I was bringing Clara back, one flower at a time. Mrs. Patterson came over with a casserole and some cuttings from her own garden. "For Clara," she said softly, and I had to turn away so she wouldn't see me tear up. Inside, I started putting things back together piece by piece. I found some of our old photos in a box in the garage, things Brandon must have missed. I hung them back on the walls. Clara at the Grand Canyon, laughing into the wind. The two of us on our wedding day, young and terrified and happy. Brandon as a little boy, before everything went wrong. I bought new frames for the ones that had been destroyed. I couldn't replace the cracked wedding photo. The glass had cut too deep. But I had it restored by a shop in Phoenix. They did beautiful work. You could barely see the damage anymore. The house started to feel like home again. I played Clara's favorite music while I cooked dinner, old jazz records she used to dance to in the kitchen. I sat in her chair and read the books she had loved. I slept on her side of the bed some nights, just to feel close to her. One evening, I was sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, when I felt it. Peace. Not the absence of pain. That was still there, probably always would be. But something deeper. A sense that Clara and I had built something that couldn't be destroyed. Not by greed, not by betrayal, not even by death. This house was ours, our history, our love, our life together. And no one, not Brandon, not Vanessa, not anyone, could ever take that away. I raised my coffee mug to the sky, to wherever Clara was now. "We did it," I whispered. "We protected what mattered." And somewhere, I swear I felt her smile.
People ask me if I ever think about forgiving Brandon. The truth is, I think about it every day. Not because I want to, but because he's still my son. Somewhere underneath all that greed and entitlement, there's still the boy who used to help Clara plant tomatoes, the kid who cried when his goldfish died, the young man who called me from college, homesick and scared. But that person is buried so deep, I don't know if he'll ever find his way back. What Brandon did to me wasn't just about a house or money. It was about erasing me, about deciding that my life, my memories, my grief didn't matter as much as his plans. He looked at his grieving father and saw an obstacle, not a person. And that's something I'm not sure I can forgive. But Clara knew. That's what still amazes me. She saw it coming years before I did. She watched our son change, watched him marry someone who measured love in dollar signs, and she knew we needed protection. The trust wasn't just about legal documents. It was about her protecting me even after she was gone. It was her way of saying, I see what's happening, and I won't let them take everything we built. That's love, real, lasting, unshakable love. Some nights I sit in the backyard and talk to her. I tell her about the garden, about how the roses are blooming again. I tell her about Mrs. Patterson bringing over cookies. I tell her about the hummingbirds that come to the feeder every morning. And I tell her thank you. Thank you for seeing the truth when I couldn't. Thank you for being strong enough to plan for the worst. Thank you for loving me enough to protect me even from our own son. This house isn't just walls and furniture anymore. It's a monument to everything Clara and I shared. Every room holds a memory. Every corner tells a story. And as long as I'm here, those stories stay alive. Brandon thought he could take it all. He thought he could rewrite history, erase our life together, and turn 43 years of marriage into profit margins and square footage. But he was wrong. Because some things can't be bought or sold or thrown into trash bags on the curb. Some things, love, loyalty, memory, are stronger than greed. They survive betrayal. They outlast cruelty. Brandon lost more than a house and an inheritance. He lost his integrity, his reputation, his marriage, his father. He thought he was being smart, but he was just being small. And in the end, I'm the one still standing in the home Clara and I built, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky, holding on to everything that truly matters. So no, I don't know if I'll ever forgive him. But I do know that I survived, that Clara's love protected me, that justice, real poetic justice, found its way home. And that's enough. So that's my story. The story of how my own son tried to destroy me and how my wife's love saved me from beyond the grave. But I want to hear from you. Was I right to fight back? Should I have forgiven Brandon and let it go? What would you have done in my position? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, hit that like button. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And turn on notifications, because trust me, there are more stories like this coming. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us the most. But sometimes love wins anyway. See you in the next life story.